AWS has 200 plus services. And when you're starting out, you look at the list and think, do I need to learn all of this? The answer to that is no, you don't. I wasted 6 months doing exactly that, watching tutorials, making handwritten notes, feeling productive. But when the interviews came around, I got overwhelmed. In those answers, I was plugging in random services, totally confused whether I should plug in containers versus instances. It felt like solving some jigsaw puzzle. And after a long time and some experience, here's what finally clicked. You need maybe 15 to 20 services to build 95% of real applications. And rest you can always learn when you get into a role. So I stopped trying to learn everything and started focusing on what actually matters. Now, if you're in the same boat, preparing for an internship, a beginner role, or even an intermediate to advanced position, and your goal is to be AWS literate in a realistic way, this video is for you. Today, I'm breaking down AWS into 7 core buckets. I will also share a detailed guide where you can practice resources provided by AWS themselves, like AWS Skill Builder and AWS Training Program. I will also be sharing detailed links around where you can practice it hands-on. So you learn by building and not memorizing each service. Where coding is actually required, what networking basics really matter, and there would be a special bucket that's purely focused on AI/ML workloads. I will also share what you can safely ignore for now. I will be sharing all the practice resources in the detailed guide below. Let's dive in. Bucket number 1 is foundation and security. Now, as pre-foundation, you need to be familiar with concepts like SDLC, which is Software Delivery Lifecycle, cloud deployment models, private, public, hybrid, multi-cloud, cloud service models, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, and then also be familiar with regions and zones, what it means, what are these data centers. Everything within cloud is connected to zones and regions. Before we touch any services, let's set up your AWS account first. So these are the day 1 actions. You first create your AWS account, go to aws.amazon.com and sign up. You will be eligible to access resources in the free tier, as well as you'll get some learning credits when you sign up. There would be an option to enable MFA as well. You can use Google Authenticator or any other app to do that. Next, you need to set up billing alerts. You go to billing, then you go to billing preferences and enable billing alerts. There would be steps to create a billing alarm whenever your usage goes over a budget. Now, you need to create an IAM user for yourself, but this is optional since you are just learning. Now, let's dive into the first piece. Here you are going to understand about AWS organization. For learning, you will only have one AWS account, but just understand that this exists. Now, why it matters? Most of the enterprises use organizations to manage multiple accounts through one master account. So you can think about having separate dev, staging, and production environment, each mapped to one account. Also, you can have separate accounts for separate teams or separate applications as well. And at the top, there would be one management account controlling all the policies across each. Now, one thing to be aware about is there's a service named AWS Control Tower, which helps you set up multi-cloud environments with guardrails and security best practices. Again, you won't be needing this for learning purposes right now, but just know that it exists. For now, one account is enough. Now, let's jump into security. This also comes under bucket 1. We start with IAM, that is Identity and Access Management. Now, what it is? It controls who can do what in your AWS account. Everything in AWS requires permissions. Launching an instance, you need IAM. Uploading to S3, again you need to come to IAM. Creating a new database, again, meet IAM. Now, how it works? There are basically 4 components within IAM. Number 1 is users. These are basically people like us. Now, the second piece is groups. It's a collection of users with same permissions. So think about like people working in the same project would have the same permissions. So they'll be a part of a group. The third component is roles. This is for AWS services or applications. Number 4th component, and something that you need to get used to, is policies. These are basically JSON documents defining permissions. A critical pattern that you would see very often, for example, you want 2 services like EC2, which is the compute service, and S3, which is the object storage service. We will be diving into it later in the other sections. But the example here is you want your EC2 instance to access objects from S3 buckets. Now we'll see where IAM comes into picture. The first step is you create an IAM role. Second step is that you attach a policy defining S3 permissions to that role. And the third step is that you attach this role to the EC2 instance. Now, EC2 instance acts as a user which has permissions to access the S3 bucket. So now you see how AIM comes into picture everywhere. Make sure you're understanding the policies and how roles, users, groups are defined or created via console. So it's easier for you to visualize the flow when it's asked in an interview. The second security component is Secret Manager. It's basically an encrypted storage system for passwords, API keys, and database credentials. The reason it's needed so that you never hardcode secrets. Basically, you're not writing the credentials in like the scripts itself. You point it to a secret, which is encrypted. Have you heard stories about people who have committed their illicit secrets into their GitHub PRs? Yes, don't be that person. The third component is System Store. This is the parameter store. It is again a storage system, but it is a free alternative to Secret Manager. It is more designed for configuration and simple secrets. And you use Secret Manager for database passwords, API keys. This particular service will cost you money, but has an automatic secret rotation that really helps keep your secrets protected. Now, the key task to do for this particular bucket. You need to create an AWS account with AWS enabled, set a billing alarm. Even if you don't like notifications, just do it. Number 3 is create an IAM user with admin permissions. Then create an IAM role. Attach a policy that gives that role permissions to access S3 buckets. And one key thing to note is you need to understand users versus roles. It's a very common and confusing topic. Now, if you can do all of these things comfortably, you move to bucket 2. This is the compute and container services. Now, every organization needs servers. Your application, everything, even this YouTube application needs to run somewhere, right? Servers ne to application run kahan karenge? And now with AI models coming into picture, we also need access to accelerated computing. These are actually fast processors like GPUs. So just a 2026 reality check, you have to build solid foundation with compute. Now look at this. AWS has like 20 plus compute services. You don't need most of these. Seriously, I'm going to tell you the 5 core services that you need to focus right now, and the ones that would actually matter for you to build applications. I'll also give you a quick rundown of all the other services, but it will be like the TLDR version. Now, we start with EC2. This is the OG version of compute offered by AWS. EC2 aka Elastic Compute Cloud. As the name suggests, it's the compute on cloud. It's a virtual server in the cloud. That's it. It's literally just a computer. Now, when you're running traditional applications, it could be like Swiggy app or DoorDash or Uber app. They all need some hardware where those applications can be hosted. Cloud compute comes into picture there. It follows a pay-as-you-go model, so you pay only for the hours you have used that compute service. Now, how it works. One of the best parts that I feel about cloud compute is like the speed. You pick your instance type, you enter how much CPU and RAM you need on the console or on CLI. You pick your OS, usually Linux or Windows, you choose, and then you launch it. And ta-da, you have got a server running in like 2 minutes. Now, cloud compute offers a bunch of instance families, and for AI workloads as well, they have specific instance type. You can look into the P instance family, that is P4 and P5. Basically, it provides GPU power for training models, G instance family for graphics and inference workloads, and there are also AWS custom chips for inference. Now, one thing I do want you to do in this particular bucket is to be familiar with CLI. So you would be launching an instance both through the console as well as the AWS CLI. Now, those who don't know CLI, AWS offers a command line interface that helps you create and manage AWS resources. Now, the key thing around this is the coding requirement. You need to know batch scripting, user data scripts, automation tasks, that kind of thing. Also, you need to be familiar with basic Linux commands because you will SSH into these instances. Now, the second service is Lambda. It helps you run code without managing servers. You write a function, upload it, and AWS runs it when triggered. Here, you don't have any servers to manage. It auto-scales by itself, and you only pay for execution time. The flow of Lambda is you write a function, maybe in Python or Node.js. You set up a trigger, could be an S3 upload or an API call, and when that trigger happens, your function runs. Now, my 2 cents regarding coding here is you do not need to be an expert, but need to be comfortable writing functions. It's just non-negotiable for AWS work right now. Number 3 service is Elastic Container Service, aka ECS. Here, you basically run Docker containers on AWS. Modern applications run in containers, and ECS is how it does it. It's simpler than Kubernetes for most use cases. Now, how it works, you package your app in a Docker container, ECS figures out where to run it, and it handles scaling and manages everything for you. For coding, you need to understand the Docker file syntax and basic Docker commands. It's not that hard, but you need to learn it. Number 4 service is Fargate. It is the serverless compute for containers. It is like ACS, but with Fargate, you don't have to manage any infrastructure. It gives you again all the benefits of container without thinking about EC2 servers. AWS handles everything. The key differentiator or the key thing that you need to understand here is ECS versus Fargate. In ECS, you will need to define all the instance configurations as well. Select the instance type, set up min, max and all those configurations. With Fargate, you just specify CPU and memory and AWS handles the rest. Number 4 service is Elastic Kubernetes Service. My personal favorite. It's basically managed Kubernetes on AWS. Now, ECS was managing containers for you. Here, Kubernetes manages containers for you. But it's also a managed Kubernetes service by AWS. There's a lot of management involved. Now, a lot of companies uses Kubernetes, and if you want AWS to manage it, EKS is the way to go. AWS manages the control plane here for you, and you deploy your containerized apps using tools like kubectl, Helm, all that stuff. Now, with coding requirements, same as ECS, need to know how to write Docker file and container knowledge. Plus, you need to understand Kubernetes concepts like pods, deployments, services, RBAC. And you'll be writing YAML, lots of YAML, which again AI can help you with. Now, one thing to note here is you need to understand the trade-offs between EKS and ECS. Common interview question. You really don't need Kubernetes for all use cases because of the additional complexity that comes with it. Now, what about all the other compute services? Now, AWS also offers you the Spot model. It's basically known as EC2 Spot instances, which is 70% cheaper, and AWS has the capability to terminate it anytime. Then there is EC2 autoscaling, which helps with scaling up or down your EC2 instances based on demand. Then there's the batch service, which runs computing jobs at scale. There are other components around cost that you need to look into. Example, savings plan or compute optimizer. By the end of this particular section, you need to be able to draw this decision tree. If you need a server always running, go to EC2. If you have event-driven or short tasks, go to Lambda. Need containerized apps and want simple, go to ECS or Fargate. Your team uses Kubernetes or you need Kubernetes specific features, go to EKS. If you need specific GPU types, you need to select EC2 machines with PNG instance families. Now we jump into bucket 3. This is the storage and databases bucket. Now before we jump into AWS specific services covering this bucket, let's first understand what storage actually means. Because there are different types of storage for different use cases. Number 1 is object storage. Think of it like unlimited cloud storage. You upload photos, videos, backups, whatever. Each file that you upload is an object which has a metadata. It's perfect for static content, archives, data lakes, etc. The second storage type is block storage. This is like hard drive attached to your compute. These are like raw storage blocks that you format and use. Your operating system can live here. Your applications can write data here. It's fast, direct, attached storage. Very close to compute. So proximity-wise, compute and block storage are very close to each other. Third type is file storage. This is like a network drive that multiple computers can access simultaneously. Something like shared file systems. When multiple servers need to read and write same files, you need file storage. Number 4 is database storage or databases. This is specialized storage type for structured data, unstructured data. The two main types within this particular component is relational, just SQL based, and then non-relational, which is NoSQL based. Now let's see the AWS counterparts for it. Number 1 is S3, which is the object storage. It's cheap, it's reliable, and very durable. Again, you can show anything, photos, backups, videos. How it works, you create buckets. Then you upload objects, which are the files. You can set permissions who can basically access these files. You can also version files. Any newer versions with the same name can be uploaded. And S3 will maintain all the versions. Then you can set things like lifecycle policies to move data from one storage type to another one, just to save some money. Now, there's no solid coding requirement here, but if you want to stand out, learn Boto3. This is the library in Python that will help you automate tasks with respect to S3. You'll basically write scripts to upload, download, and list files. Number 2, EBS, which is the block storage. EBS, aka Elastic Block Store, they are basically the virtual hard drives for EC2 instances. Every EC2 needs storage. Your OS boots from EBS. Your application data lives here. And it's persistent. Even if your instance stops, your data stays. Number 3 is EFS, aka Elastic File System. Now, shared file system, multiple EC2 instances can access simultaneously. Now, how it works, you create a file system and you mount it on multiple EC2 instances. So whatever read and write operations happen, all those EC2 instances can see the same files. And also since it's elastic, AWS scales it up and down based on the requirement. Number 4 is databases, and we are starting with relational databases. The AWS-based service is known as RDS. It's basically managed MySQL, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, Oracle, SQL DB servers. Now, how it works? You pick your database engine, choose instance size. AWS handles backups, patches, and multi-AZ failovers. You just use it like any other database. Now, topics you need to understand is multi-AZ, read replicas, automated backups, and with respect to coding requirement, you need to know basic SQL, select, insert, update, delete operations, and also connection handling in your app code, basically how your application is going to connect to that database. The other subcomponent here is NoSQL database, and DynamoDB is a service for it. This is a serverless NoSQL key value and document database. There are no servers at all. You pay per request. Latency is pretty good, and you don't have to do any capacity planning for this particular service. Now, how it works? You create a table, define your primary key structure, and then you start reading and writing through this database. AWS again handles everything: scaling, backups, and replication. Now, as a coding requirement, you need to understand JSON and NoSQL concepts, working with partition keys and sort keys. Now, here's the real talk. You need to understand the difference between RDS and DynamoDB. You use RDS when you need complex queries with joins. Your data model is relational. You are migrating from traditional databases. And you need asset transactions across multiple records. You use Dynamo when you need speed and scale, simple access patterns, key value lookups, serverless architecture, and variable workloads. DynamoDB can scale to 0. And there are additional storage services like Elasticache, which has other types like Redis and Memcached, helps you with in-memory caching. And then there's Aurora, which is AWS own relational database. Read those two. Now the storage decision tree here. If you need to store files like images, videos, backups, you use S3, object storage. If you need a hard drive for EC2, you go with EBS, block storage. If you need multiple servers accessing the same files, EFS is the way to go. If you need a database with complex queries, you go with RDS. If you need speed, scale, and simple queries, DynamoDB is the way to go. And if you need to cache data, Elasticache is the service for you. Now, these cover 95% of the AWS storage services. Now, we enter into bucket 4, that is the networking and content delivery. Networking scares people, but here's your reality check. You don't need to be a network engineer in order to enter into cloud. You just need to know enough to connect systems. I know that's pretty vague. Now, within bucket 4, the first thing you start with is VPC, which is the virtual private cloud. It's your own private network in AWS. Just think of it like as a building which is your own. No one can enter without your permission. No one can exit without your permission. I mean, if you own a building, you're pretty rich. But yeah, that's the analogy you need to build. VPC is like a safe space. And why you need it? The reasons are security and isolation. For example, your database should not be accessed by internet. Your VPC is that layer that protects it. Now, how it works? You define an IP range, so be familiar with IP concepts, the CIDR blocks. Next, you create subnets. There are public ones that need access to internet, and then there are private ones for databases and internal services. Then you set up route tables to control the traffic flow. Now, what you need to know here is private versus public subnets, internet gateway, NAT gateways, security groups. They're basically firewall rules. You allow or deny access through it. And one thing that you can ignore is that you don't need to memorize CIDR notation. You can use a calculator. There are a bunch of those available on internet as well. Other thing is you don't need to understand advanced routing concepts. Basic level is fine. The second networking component is load balancers. It's basically the front end that helps you distribute the incoming traffic across multiple servers. So load balancer decides who gets what. So reason it's used is for high availability, because if one server dies, traffic needs to go to the other one. It also have advanced features like handling SSL certificates for secure connections, health checks, making sure the instance is up and ready to serve traffic, and all of that. Now, how it works is like you create a load balancer and add targets, basically the backend servers where the traffic would be routed to. There are different routing strategies as well within load balancers, like which server gets the request. You can dive into that as well. Now, there are two types of load balancers that matters. One is the application load balancer, which helps with web traffic. And then there's network load balancer for everything else. The third networking service is Route 53. This is the AWS-based DNS service, domain name system service. Now, every application needs a domain name. For example, www.google.com is mapped to an IP address, but the google.com is the domain name. And that domain needs to point to a load balancer. Remember we discussed before? Now how it works. For example, if you want to register a domain, xyz.com. So here you will buy a new domain, go to Route 53 and go to registered domains, search for a domain name and you can purchase it directly. Then you create hosted zones, DNS records and sets Route 53 as the DNS provider. The next component is CloudFront. It's the content delivery network. Why it matters? The simple answer is speed. Your content gets cached at edge locations worldwide. If users in America wants to access servers in India, they get it from a nearby edge location, which could be somewhere in US itself. Because just imagine that request going from US to India. The latency. Wow. Now the next component is API gateway. It is used to create and manage APIs when your front end needs to talk to your back end. API gateway sits in the middle. It handles authentication, rate limiting, and all that stuff. Now, how it works, you basically define your API endpoints, connect them to your backend. Could be Lambda functions, could be EC2 servers. And once you deploy it, you get managed APIs. Now, the networking pattern here. You use VPC to keep things secure, load balancer to handle traffic, Route 53 to handle DNS, CloudFront to access applications faster, and API gateway to expose your service to get access by other services. That's basically the modern AWS architecture. Now we enter into bucket 5. This is the DevOps and automation bucket. This is where you stop clicking in the console and automate everything. We start with CloudFormation. It's the infrastructure as code service provided by AWS. You define code using YAML templates. Why it exists? Just imagine you are managing thousands of AWS servers. What would be more feasible? You going to console and clicking launch instance for each? Or basically define it in a template and let AWS deploy it. So basically this service helps you define infrastructure, like everything that you want to do through console, through code. You version it, deploy it, tear it, redeploy it. You don't have to click a lot. A coding requirement for this is you need to understand how to read and write YAML, understand template structure. So it's more configuration than coding. Second component here is AWS CDK, which is the Cloud Development Kit. So here it's IC, which is basically infrastructure as code using a programming language. So remember we were writing YAML for CloudFormation to deploy the whole environment. Here you will use Python or TypeScript instead of YAML. You'll get all the power of programming language, loops, conditions, reusable functions, components. Honestly, if you're comfortable with coding, you can skip CloudFormation and enter into CDK programming. And it's more powerful and straight to work with. Another component within the DevOps and automation space is a group of services. And these are code pipeline, code build, and code deploy. It helps you automate your build as well as your deployment. Whenever code gets pushed to GitHub, it's automatically tested and automatically deployed also. Code pipeline here orchestrates everything. Code build compiles your code and produces a deployable unit, basically the artifacts that would be your application jar files. And then code deploy helps you deploy into your servers or ECS containers. There is another service called EventBridge, which is more used for serverless architectures. Why it is powerful? As an example, instead of service A calling service B directly, service A emits an event and EventBridge routes it to anyone who needs it. It's loose coupling and easier to scale. In this service, you will be defining event patterns. And when event matches your patterns, EventBridge triggers your targets. Now let's jump into bucket 6 and the most important one now. This is the AI and machine learning bucket. This is the 2026 differentiator. AI is not optional. It's expected out of you. 3 patterns to run AI workloads on AWS. There are managed services such as Bedrock or AWS SageMaker. There are serverless patterns. Here you are using Lambdas and APIs for event-driven workloads. And then there are containers when you need custom inference or training workloads running on GPUs. Now, starting with Amazon Bedrock, you get access to foundation models like Claude, Llama, and others through an API. Now, why this is huge? You can build AI features or AI applications without training models. Just call the API, send your prompt, and get a response. Now, as a coding requirement, you need to understand how to make API calls. Either Python with Boto 3 or JavaScript with AWS SDK. So basically your code, you will call the APIs. So that's where coding is used. Second service is SageMaker. Here you build, train, and deploy custom ML models. You need to just understand how it's used. You can either be hands-on with this, or and even if you have high-level understanding on SageMaker, That's good enough. In this particular service, you will be using notebooks to develop models. Basically, data scientists use notebooks here. Once the model is developed, you train them through SageMaker and then you deploy to an endpoint. And that endpoint is basically the API call. Remember, you send a prompt to an API and you get a response similar. Here you're developing a model, training it, and then creating an endpoint. And then your application can call that endpoint. Now, most DevOps people or cloud people don't go deeper on SageMaker because data scientist roles are more tailored to these services. Now, another one is Amazon Q Developer. It's an AI coding assistant built into VS Code and to the AWS console. It helps you write code faster, understand AWS concepts, help debug issues quicker. It's basically a productivity multiplier. Use it. Then there are other services like Textract, Rekognition, Comprehend. They are basically specific to certain tasks. Textract, for instance, extract text from documents. Rekognition helps with image and video analysis. And Comprehend is used for natural language processing. Now we enter into bucket 7. This is a monitoring and cost tracker. Number 1 is CloudWatch. This is a monitoring and observability piece for everything in AWS. It helps you understand when things break, preferably before the user notices it. Now, how it works. It has metrics that tracks performance like CPU, memory, disk space, etc. Then logs that captures what's happening. Alarms that notifies you when thresholds are crossed. And dashboards that helps you visualize everything. Then there's Cost Explorer and budgets. Now, this piece is important because at times there are questions around cost and how will you set up budgets. So dive into it a little bit more. You have to explain how you will control your AWS spending. Like AWS bills can shock you. For example, if you're running through the task and you're not keeping an eye on your credits, your wallet is screwed. I have seen people leave running resources and then get $1,000 bills. Don't be that person. You need to set up a budget alarm and make sure you get notified if anything crosses the threshold. Now, the other third piece is CloudTrail. This is important. Now, one thing to understand is cloud is basically infrastructure as APIs. Every service call, everything you do, every access point within AWS is basically an API. You are creating an instance, you're calling an API. Now, there should be a way to track these APIs. What if some user is running some systems within your environments and you don't know what they are and who's doing what? That's where CloudTrail comes into picture. It helps with security, compliance, debugging. Someone in the company deleted a production database. You can find them through CloudTrail. So nothing specific you have to do around it. You just enable it once. But as a learner, you should know about CloudTrail. And if someone asks you how you can track that person, CloudTrail is the way to go. Now we enter into the wrapper session. These are the 7 portfolio projects that you need to build in order to be AWS literate. Number 1 is a 3-tier web application. You build VPC with public and private subnets. Then you have an application load balance in your public subnet, EC2 instances in one private subnet, and databases in another private subnet. Here you will learn a lot about VPC networking, security groups, load balancing, connecting apps with databases. The details are in the guide below. The second project is serverless REST API. You'll get some templates out there in GitHub repos as well for this project, but you will be working a lot with API gateway for your endpoints, Lambda functions for your logic, and DynamoDB for your storage. So first project covered a few services, second project covered a few services. Now we dive into third project, which is the CI/CD pipeline. Hi there, DevOps lovers. This is for you. There's a skill builder lab which gives you a good exposure to the CI/CD pipeline. Again, linked into the description guide below. You'll use code pipeline that triggers on GitHub push, code build compile and build Docker images, pushes to ECR, deploys to EC2, ECS or EKS. Fourth project is event-driven file processing systems, follows the AWS event-driven architecture, S3 bucket for uploads, Lambda for again logic and processing, EventBridge for orchestration, and SNS, which is the notification service, something which is also you'll get exposure to. Project 5 is AI-based, which is document analysis. There's again a skill builder lab, which will help you use AWS-based services for document analysis. What you learn from is AI service integration, document processing, and end-to-end workflows. Services like S3, Lambda, Textract, Comprehend all comes into this project. Project 6 is a little advanced. It's infrastructure as code with CDK. Again, CDK, you have to get familiar with coding. I do want you to try it out. If not, you can maybe skip it, but I would recommend not to. Define entire application stack using code. Everything, VPC, ECS clusters, RDS database, everything through writing the code via CDK. Now, project 7 is advanced level AI based. This is developing an AI based chatbot using Bedrock. You'll use API Gateway for chat endpoint, Lambda function calling Bedrock, DynamoDB for storing conversation history, and front end you can host on S3 with CloudFront. Now, this could be your 2026 showcase piece, AI-powered application on AWS infrastructure. Now, in the guide below, I have shared all the detailed steps as well as the labs you need to do for each of these buckets. So do check it out. All right, let's wrap this up. 7 buckets, that's all you need to focus on, not those 200 services. Then you have to build those 7 projects. No cheating here, just do it. So the key thing again to learn here is you have to find ways so that you don't get overwhelmed, but also do things that will not confuse you during your interviews. And in order to do that, you have to build things, break things, and then fix them. That's the only way how you learn AWS. All resources for each of these buckets are in the guide below. So do check out the link that's added to the description below. If it was helpful, let me know in the comments and stay tuned for the Google Cloud Roadmap. See you in the next one.